O'Brien, welcome to the Petey Performance Podcast. It's a pity we couldn't make it happen in person, but we are here now. We're on Zoom, as we're well used to since obviously the last couple of years have happened with COVID, etc. But welcome, and it's a bit of a blast from the past from me because I don't know if you're aware, but you used to absolutely terrorize me opposite me at 10 when you were playing for Mullingar and I was playing for Ross Gray.
Thanks for having me on, first of all, and apologies about terrorizing you back in the day, but no, it was good times. I think I remember playing against you down in Roscrea. I was playing, I think it would have been, probably would have been under 18s or something. What would it have been? I'm not really.
I think it was 19s. You were playing a year up, and I think I know what game you're reflected on because you had a particularly good game that day. You scored a hat trick of tries. It was against Roscrea and Bird, the Rebels, in it was a semi-final, I think, actually.
I think it was, and that was actually the first and only game I think I played for the 19s because I was playing a couple of years underage, I think, and it was sort of when our season was over, but. Good memories, I'll say.
Good memories for you, not for me. Yeah. But look, we'll put it behind us now. We're here for a conversation anyway. So how's life treating you now? You're in the business world. So how's the hectic week looking for you at the moment?
It's a lot different. Having the weekends to do whatever I want is very nice. Having, I suppose, a normal 9 to 5 as well, so you can plan things before and after work and during work. The hours are very flexible. I'm working from home with a software company called Tech Enable based out of Dublin. But yeah, look, I'm able to just do. They're very flexible with the hours, and once the work is getting done, they don't mind when you do it. So, I mean, it's. I suppose when you think, sometimes it's like it's tough because you don't really reach the same highs, I suppose, as when you were playing rugby, in terms of like going to work. You're never going to get the same adrenaline as the work you do on a Saturday in the RDS, but at the same time there is there's pros and cons to both of it. I mean, you can excel from an office and you can excel from a pitch. It's just people enjoy watching other people run around a pitch and not work from an office, so that's why it's much more enticing and appealing, I suppose, to people. But look, all in all, I think it's I only have positive memories from my time playing, and it's such a different world. It's crazy that like I'm 26 now, and like I hadn't worked a day in my life up until a couple of months ago. So when in terms of like, obviously I was working, but I didn't see it as work. It was so enjoyable most of the time. So it's different, but yeah, look, I'm embracing it. As I said, having the weekends free is bliss, and look, I'll get back having some sort of routine in terms of doing training and bits of running myself, whatever my hamstring allows me. But until that time comes around, I'm quite content.
So that is something that people would miss from an aspect of professional sport, because you've spoken there a little bit about freedom. And you've spoken about experiencing freedom on the pitch, and that was probably joyous for you. But at the same time, because of how diligent and dedicated you have to be to your craft, you don't experience the same freedoms that the general population would experience in their 9 to 5, is what you're touching on there. So you're actually enjoying the freedom outside of your 9 to 5 now, but you're probably missing the element of freedom or play that you were getting from the sporting endeavors. So that's an interesting one. Is that probably the major difference that you see so far, and probably the major benefit so far that you've seen, in that now you have more time to spend time with your loved ones and spend time with your friends? Well, maybe not your rugby playing friends, but your other friends that are doing 9 to 5 as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still see the rugby lads all the time as well. So it's like, as I said in a previous interview, I moved out of a house I was in with Will Connors and Jimmy O'Brien and moved back to Mullingar. But it was more so of a logistics thing that I was renting in Dublin, and I was able to work from home, so it made sense to go home and I suppose step out of the bubble. But they're still my best mates. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, the freedom of having a 9 to 5, but then you don't actually have any ways to express yourself the way you would on a rugby pitch, because I mean you're putting your own stamp on the way you play and what you do. So yeah, I get that. I haven't really thought about it like that. I suppose it made me think now. Yeah, it's a cruel mistress sport, because people see it as like these lads don't work, and they don't have the same pain points that I have, because I'm providing for my family here, working 9 to 5, breaking my back doing that. And it's fair enough, because that is true in a sense, but also the mental and physical, I won't say torture, but the mental and physical sort of demand from professional athletes, and especially the athletes who aren't at, say, the top 5% of their craft, which would be the majority. But they've obviously worked hard to get there, so I'm not saying that, but sometimes it just comes down to ability. But those, that's extremely hard, because you're moving around clubs. I know it's professional soccer and professional American football, any sport really, that if you're not in that, say, elite category of the elite category, because professional sports people are like the top 1% of anyone that plays the sport, but within that, then there is it's broken down into even more categories in terms of ability and how valuable you are to an organization. So I think when you're looking in on those sort of people who they're going to be in the starting 15 or the starting 11 with soccer, or they're in the starting lineup in American football, I'm just using that as an example for the American sports, but it's very hard because, the uncertainty of having a contract, the uncertainty of training, being able to play at the weekends, selection, and of course everyone has those issues, but I think it's just when it's a constant, when it's consciously in your mind constantly, it's very, very difficult to express yourself and have that freedom you're talking about. So I think being able to compartmentalize that as best you can, and I suppose find a way to not have that being on your mind when you do cross the white line, that you get your opportunity, that it's not like you're not this bundle of anxiety and fear and you're worrying about the wrong things. You need to be in a good mindset that you're going to express yourself and play the best you can, but it's not always the case. And I know from my own personal experiences, like you're putting your heart and soul and 110%, and you're saying working extra hours and extra gym sessions, extra runs, and then the fruit at the end is not what you thought it would be. So it's hard to keep going, I suppose, but yeah, as I said, the freedom to express yourself, I don't think if you can master being able to go in and being completely comfortable in what you do but playing at such a high standard, then you've hit the nail on the head, and that's goals for any athlete, I think. So I think everyone has their own battles, and it could be something completely arbitrary to one guy versus another. So someone might be getting bogged down on something that I'd be like, why would you even why is that even on your mind? But then for another person, it could be similar what I'm saying. So it's weird. It's a weird one. It's human nature, I suppose. So
that's an interesting insight, because obviously it is all relative and everybody has their issues that they work through and their challenges, but that is probably not talked about very often, in that you did actually mention on Off the Ball on your interview as well, that when you're not in that 25 that are playing week in, week out, it's an incredibly hard mental battle to fight to get in there. And then you're fighting and trying so hard to get in there. Once you're in there, then you have to forget about all that and try and just play your game yourself. But in a way, it's probably very, very difficult to switch off. I'm just reflecting on, I know you said 25, but the 23, if you're in that 25 or the 26, sometimes it's even more difficult, because we've had Peter Dooley on the podcast, and just from conversations with Peter and Jerry over the years, Peter was traveling for many, many years as a traveling reserve. And you mentioned uncertainty there. There's so much uncertainty if you're a traveling reserve, and I'm sure it's a position you found yourself in as well, because you're covering a number of different positions. And you have to be ready to go down to the field for the warm-up or swap your bib over at a moment's notice because somebody's become injured. How difficult is that when you're outside of that inner group or the tried and tested guys that are playing week in, week out, and you're trying to break into it? Because mentally it just seems like it's an absolute slog.
It is, yeah, it is. I mean, the first couple of times there's a bit of novelty to it because you get to go travel away and, you know, see what it's about and what the lads are doing and stuff. So when I was like 20, 22 kind of thing in the academy, and then after like the third or fourth time, you're like, oh my God, how am I, like, this is not enjoyable, because as you were saying, you have to prepare like you're playing. So you do about 80% of the preparation in terms of your fuel. So like you're not carb loading because you're not carb loading fully because you're probably not going to play, but you need to be carb loaded to a certain amount that you might play. And then you need to know the moves inside out, which can at times be tricky when you're in the academy and you're not fully, I suppose, comfortable with some of the plays and you don't get any reps. So if you do get called in, you're innately going to be more underprepared than someone who's been running reps and training with the starting team. But I think especially for some of the specialist positions, so like scrum halves, hookers, props, they get stuck with being the extra man a good bit, because if one of them go down, they have to, like, you can't throw someone in that's not a specialist position. So you couldn't bring like 1 second row to cover all the forwards, because if a hooker goes down, like, you're not going to put him into the front row. So with me, I was a little bit less than some guys, because obviously an outside back, they can usually bring a 24th man, is what you call it, the match day 23, and then the 24th man could be 5 lads as 24th man. It's just sort of the phrase, but they'd usually just bring a gadget sort of a player that could play numerous positions in the back line. Maybe, I think the scrum half, usually they bring a spare scrum half. So if you're third choice hooker or third choice scrum half, generally speaking, you have a lot of pain being 24th man, because you've been it tens of times. Sometimes, in some cases, I've heard lads, they could have been 24th man like 30 times before they played and stuff, like crazy stuff. But it's that I was 24th man down in Munster in my first year playing, and Dave Carney injured himself in the warm-up, so I got called in, and I wasn't starting. I was just on. I went onto the bench, and I just, for whatever reason, I just got a bit flustered. It was a packed Thomond Park, and like, I was grand. I played okay when I come on, but like, Jesus, I was breaking it, to say the least. It was like, I just felt like I was underprepared and thrown in off the street nearly, So that was.
Did you go in the centre?
I went in, I came on for, I think it was Noel Reid. Noel Reid started, and I went onto the bench, and I just wasn't expecting it, because it was literally when the warm-up was over, 1 minute, we were going into the dressing room. I was jogging in, and Leo was like, "You're in." And I was like, "What?" So I just started, we had a little play sheet, and I was carrying that around me then on the bench, and I wasn't thinking about my own performance. It was like just nailing the detail, I suppose, because they're pretty big on getting everyone knowing their detail inside out, which is completely understandable. So I was probably focusing on the wrong things, but it was just, when you say it, like, someone could be 24th man 20 times in their career and never play from being 24th man, and then other guys could get like me thrown in and play. I know Jimmy was 24th man going to Galway one time when we were playing Connacht, and he came off. Someone got injured in the warm-up again, and he came on. I think he got man of the match that day. He played really well. So like, it's sometimes, again, it's how you handle it, and where your mind's at, and how prepared you are and stuff like that. But that's just one of the aspects, I suppose, of professional sport. If you're a traveling reserve, it's quite tricky, I think.
When you're looking at the play sheet, then it sounds like that's a bit of a struggle for you, in that you might be, like a lot of people, one of those players that needs to do it in order to be able to know where you need to be at the right time, and in order to be able to remember the play. Whereas we both know there are other players that can react a little bit better with visual or verbal cueing. So maybe the play sheet is perfect for them, and they can look at it and it's like, yeah, look, I can do that. And 100%, I know where I need to be. But if you're not getting the reps, it can be very, very hard to execute and be in the right place and the right position at the right time for a set play, for maybe not an open play, because open play you're playing a little bit more off the cuff and it's a little bit more playing how you would usually play and just playing off of your reaction or play what's in front of you, as they say. Would you be someone that would struggle with that, learn by visual? And then when you're looking at the play, are you then thinking about and visualizing how you would run it so that you're trying to put yourself into that learn by doing mindset, or that learn by doing kind of scenario?
Yeah, well, I think it'd probably be, I get what you mean, do it or learn. It's the same with anything really. Like some people learn by verbal cues, some people learn by reading, some people learn by doing. But I think it's a combination really for me. I think if I was just to do one, I might struggle. But if you explained the concept of the play, and once that's understood, I think that goes a very, very long way. It's the same with Anton. If you understand something, it's much easier to learn it. So if I'm looking at a play on the page and I'm not fully briefed on what the aim of it is, like obviously the aim of most plays is to score, but sometimes it's to set up field position, or it's to, because a lot of those moves are very, very intricate, and Felipe Contepomi was very good at explaining the exact detail what the purpose of a move was. So like he'd like go down to such detail that, like, say a first phase line out, hit up in the center, and it's exactly who he wants to target from them to tackle, so that they can't fold around the corner with that player. So like sometimes you're running into the flanker, so he can't get around, and getting the 10 to fold around, whereas and then exactly who's cleaning him and how deep it is. So you're like clean deep on the ruck, force them to run further around the ruck rather than having a straight line to get out and fan out. And then the second phase is exactly what we predict they will do, or who they'll have defending, and how, will they have someone slightly sitting off? If so, you're playing, if the winger comes up, you can just stab it in behind and our winger is ready for it. Or if they play with the man in behind, we can play to the width and things like that. So I think having that, he's very good at, I suppose, explaining what the purpose of every move is, and that is very helpful for me, because once I understand it, I think it's much easier to learn and run the reps. Now, of course, being able to run the reps in real time is also very important, because getting the timings right and cues. So I was quite bad at that. I'd always run too early for my moves, and Felipe used to hate it because it'd mess up the whole flow, I suppose, of the set piece. And I'd always be very eager to go and run. And so I was always too early. So he was like, for most moves, you're kind of going off the scrum half. So once he moves, then that's your cue to run. And I think being able to do that in real time was probably the most important thing for me, because I'd overrun it. I just feel like I'd nearly be in the defensive line before the ball is even off the line out, if I could. So I know there's a funny clip of our interpro year, under 20s, and for some reason we had the video footage up of our game down in Munster. We played down in UCC's ground, and there's a clip of me standing about 40 yards back from a scrum and just started running when the ball hadn't even left the scrum half for him to feed it into the scrum. And like all the lads found this absolutely hilarious when they were watching it back, because obviously Felipe had been giving out to me so much about like not timing my runs properly, and then it goes back to under 20s and I'm there like a train coming running, and the scrum half hadn't even fed it into the scrum yet. So that's probably the most important thing for me, will be being able to understand and run in real time, because otherwise if I just look at it, I'd be like, okay, yeah, Grant, I know what I'm doing here, but my timing could be completely off. So timing is everything, really.
Timing is everything, because you're not an option if you overrun it, and then the defense will just ignore you, which you don't want to happen, obviously. But it sounds like there that Felipe is very direct in his communication, and he's quite good at that. And when people hear you talking about the intricacies of the moves and whatnot, they're probably thinking like, oh my God, how the hell are you supposed to remember all of that? So my question would be, in relation to the coaching, and specifically maybe Felipe's style of coaching with those backs moves or those set piece moves, actually, where the forwards are integrated into it, is it a case that it's a combination of all of the above, as what you said earlier, like he is explaining it in great detail, and then you're doing it in team meetings as well and going through it in great detail, but maybe then you're handed out information or a sheet in regards to where each player is meant to be at each different position or each different time in the move, because people are probably thinking, like, how could I remember all of that information about everybody's position? But unfortunately, you have to know that if the move is going to move cohesively, like, and that is the issue that you run into, probably not in Leinster, but especially when you're playing underage, as you say, as we were talking about there, because like some players will be like, they'll just want to know what they're doing. And then you're trying to explain to them, it doesn't matter what you're doing if you don't understand what the guy beside you is trying to do or doing, because you won't be effective.
Yeah, well, I think, as you were saying, Felipe was very direct. I think possibly because of the language, I won't say barrier because he was fluent in English, but it was always very black and white. So there was no, if you did something wrong, it was, you did this wrong. There was no like, okay, I thought you could have done this a bit better. It was just like right or wrong, which is good and sometimes bad, but it was good. So he was very big on explaining everything inside out. So you could be an hour in a meeting listening to him explaining the moves, and like most people already know them, but they was still very, very important, because once everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet, you just get like, because you have so many different moving parts, you need the whole overriding engine to work. So he was very big on like setups and like where you were on the field and what was the purpose of what you were doing on the field at all times. So it was a constant. It wasn't naturally ingrained in me from a young age. He was very it was sort of a concept he brought in more, was like, where are we on the pitch and what am I doing and what do we want to accomplish on the pitch? So it was mostly, we'd get, there's 7 backs on the pitch. You'd try and be getting a 5-2 split. So there'd be 5 backs on one side, 2 on the other. And, you're constantly scanning where the space is and all these moving parts that everyone knows what the overarching purpose of what they're doing is. And then they also know what they're doing to work. So we're like little bees in a beehive trying to run around the place and do what we were told to do, really. But that was the most important thing, that you didn't have these individuals going off on their own and doing some crazy stuff that was never going to work, or that was a bit speculative, that it was reasonably robotic in that sense. In terms of, we were conditioned to maybe over conditioned to play within the system and not be able to express ourselves the way we probably could have. So that would probably be my one smaller criticism. But then again, you can't have 15 guys going off doing their own thing, because it'd just be chaos. And we like organized chaos, not complete chaos. So it's a fine line, because you want people to be able to do what they do best, but also they need to have some sort of a limitation as to how much they express themselves, because we can't have chip shots on our own try line and stuff, chips over the top.
Well, it's been seen before.
It's been seen before, yeah.
It's
but you know what I mean? Like, it's just,
I know exactly what you mean.
You
can't have people just going off and doing their own thing, because it's a team game. It's not an individual game.
Yeah, exactly.
You're still leaving room to play off instinct in certain scenarios in a split second, but it's given people the guidelines to go by almost for the whole time, but you still have to leave room for them to react to what's happening on the field as well.
Exactly. It's just express yourself within the system kind of thing. So there is a cap on how much you can do, but I know some teams are obviously, you can tell they're very loose with their play, and it's sort of like, go out and express yourself, and that's it. Like, but yeah, I'd question some of it to an extent and how successful it is.
But it's the same as business in a way, isn't it? You need a direction that you're going in and how we're going to get there. You have to talk about how you're going to get there, but you still need to allow a little bit of freedom for creativity within that system. So what has transferred over to the business world from being in that professional environment in your career?
It's mostly like the attitude and, hard work. resilience and things like that, like stuff that it isn't necessarily a necessary skill for a job, in terms of I wouldn't be able to, tell you how to reassemble a computer, but I could, have the work ethic to go and learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. And if I'm having issues doing it, then I have the resilience to keep going at it. So I think things like that would be definitely transferred across very kindly for me. So it's mostly sort of attitude things. And then I also did my degree while I was playing, which also helped with, I suppose, some of the learned abilities. But no, like there's like, I think the attitude of the individual is probably the main thing for most employers, because if you bring a good attitude and do the right things and say the right things, I think that's probably 90% of it, because the other stuff can be learned. And I think attitude is the key to how quickly it's learned and the way in which it's learned.
But you touched on there saying the right things as well. And I'm interested to ask you, has your communication and your ability to work within a team transferred at all? Because that's what you've been doing for the last
I suppose
10 years.
I suppose, but like, I mean, it never was something I learned too. Like, I'm not going to have to start shouting at people.
No, but it's not
meetings.
Conscious either. It's your ability to get across a message or to work within a meeting. Yeah,
no, for sure. I think, again, there's people within the rugby circle that wouldn't be good at that, and they wouldn't be like, they might be very good at demanding and bossing things, people in games or in training, but then like you sit them down after training and get them to speak in the meeting or whatever, and it's, they're getting their point across, but it's not like
it's not clear.
making the hairs stand on the back of your neck or anything. It's sort of like I think that, again, that comes down to the individual, really, like how sociable you are and how you can communicate with other people, because obviously people are learning and teaching themselves and self-help on how to do that better, because it's very important. Communication is like ultra important in anything. But I think, again, it's sometimes down to like how naturally someone is with other people and how they can get their point across and communicate. And obviously you can learn it as well, but I probably would have been better at being able to just be real with people and talk to them and be a sound person. I'm always a big advocate of being sound, because I think that goes a long way in business and in every walk of life as well. That you just don't take any BS, but you're also quite sound and a good person. So you're not getting walked all over, but people respect you. So like, I'd always try and give advice best I can. I mightn't be able to always do what my advice is, but offering counsel to my friends and family and work colleagues now, that I'm able to take it on board and also dish out what I've learned in the past. I think I enjoy doing that, and I think it's something that I'm improving at a good bit. So that's another aspect that I hadn't really thought of now that you're saying it. But like, I suppose even just hopping on a call with a couple of my teammates now, being able to talk to them and get things done, I think is very important, because if someone doesn't like you within an organization, you tend not to they just don't work for you. So I'm not managing people now, but just in terms of trying to get a task done or whatever that might be, that I think when you're a nice person and they respect you, it tends to move a lot faster.
Absolutely. What people will probably think listening to that monologue there is, you're an incredibly self-aware individual. Do you think that the self-awareness has been helped to develop as a result of your trials and tribulations with the injury history that you've experienced?
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's self-awareness, but sometimes it's really negative. It's not really negative self-awareness, but like I'm a thinker, so I overthink a good bit. And again, when I give out advice to people about overthinking, it's brilliant advice that I don't follow myself. So it's a tough one, and it's something I'm constantly working on, because I think if you're over self-aware, I can be overcritical, and it's always something I've struggled with, is that confidence piece and beating myself up. Because if I see someone doing something, I'd be like, I should be able to do that, and when I'm not able to do it, I get a bit frustrated and probably a bit sad in myself. So that's one thing that I think is probably a work on for me. But what was the second part of that question?
The second part was in relation to your self-awareness. Has it developed through your trials and tribulations with injury?
Yeah, sorry, yeah. So yeah, again, it was like when you get injured once, it's fine, and twice it's less fine, and so on and so forth. So that was the ups and downs of it were just probably too much by the end of it, because it was so unenjoyable having to, like, I hated rehab, and the fact that I had to do it for probably a combined 2 full seasons in total, from maybe even longer, but from start to finish in terms of every injury I've had. Like, I think I counted 7 or 8 surgeries by the end of my career, with ankles and knees and hamstrings combined. And like that, just like, again, once a season is maybe fine doing that, but like having it 2 or 3 times a season, it was just crazy. And I think that's when that self-awareness thing came in. It was like, oh, I was aware that this wasn't going to work out nearly, when my hamstring wasn't getting better on the last time. So that was tough, but I had dealt with all this, like, it would have been like probably 6 months ago or so, when I knew my hamstring wasn't getting better. I was coming back to train, and yeah, like, I mean, it was obviously a really tough time for me, and it was the uncertainty of what I was going to do next that I suppose was the hardest part. But then by the time I started talking about it with people, like, I had already dealt with it, so it was just sort of being able to look at it from another point of view and perspective, that I think was why people maybe saw me as being this, brave person that, didn't take it too seriously afterwards, and has a good attitude. But like, it wasn't the case at the time, because it was pretty dark in terms of not knowing what the next step was, and if my hamstring would get better, would I play rugby again? What would I do after rugby? Was I enjoying it? Was I ever going to enjoy it again? Like, all these things are going through your head. But I think being able to be at peace with the decision that was forced upon me is probably the most important thing for me, because I mean, I could dwell in the past for the rest of my life, and that would not get me anywhere, because I'd just be living in the past, when I think we're all very aware that living in the present is the most optimal thing to do. So yeah, like, by the time I speak about it now, and the last couple of months, I mean, I dealt with all the issues that came with it previously. And I mean, I always talk about my support network around me, and it's such a cliche, but I do. A loving family and girlfriend and friends goes a very, very long way. So I'm very blessed in that regard. I sound very hippie-ish or something now, talking about like being blessed, no. But it's true. It's true. It is true. I think when you're not alone doing these things, and it comes back to us being social animals, that having a good community and tribe around you is so important. And that's probably one thing I'll miss about rugby as well, because like, it was a bit of a brotherhood there. So this is probably the next question you're going to ask me about the looks of it. But,
no, well, I was just about to say that, like, it's an interesting one with injury, because you do feel quite isolated, obviously, when you're going away and dealing with the rehab process, and you're experiencing a lot of emotions. And what people will probably get from the few times you've spoken now since retiring is that you have a high level of acceptance in that you did your best, and what happened, and now there's no point dwelling on it, and let's move forward. But people will think like that acceptance just came overnight. Was it more of a gradual thing with all of the injuries that you went through, or the final one, I suppose, and trying to get through that rehab process? And then the follow-on question from that is, was that acceptance helped by the support network and the brotherhood that you had around you?
Yeah, like, I mean, like, it's not as, I suppose, it's not as straightforward as did it happen overnight. It definitely didn't happen overnight, but I suppose when you get injured so much, you probably think it's things start creeping into your mind that, like, is this for me, kind of thing. And then I suppose when the final injury happened and it was the end, that I was able to accept, in terms of like, there was probably a reason behind all this, and the universe told me that. So again, that's all very wishy-washy, but it probably is some truth in it. Maybe, I know a lot of people believe in that sort of stuff, and I believe in some of it to an extent, but I was pretty chilled about the idea of calling it a day, with the fact that my hamstring couldn't take the load of playing professional rugby. So that made it a hell of a lot easier, I suppose, because I was sort of forced into it. And I think if say that I got another injury after this injury that was completely separate, like you would have been thinking like, it's definitely not for me, but like I'm still physically able to do it. So that probably would have been harder. The fact that I think I talked about it in that interview that I did previously, that I had, I've lost my train of thought now.
I think I can help you pick it up. I think because it like you touch on there that you weren't physically able to stick with it and keep going in professional rugby, but that's in stark contrast to what you experienced prior to that when you did the ACL, because you experienced a state of denial with the ACL, because when it occurred initially you were like, oh, it's fine, I'll just go off, I'll strap it up and I'll be fine tomorrow. So you knew that your body could do it, you just didn't have a cruciate ligament, unfortunately, but you were trying to convince yourself that you did have a cruciate ligament, which didn't go too well from what you outlined in that interview.
Like it's just it slowly breaks down any bit of hope you have in terms of playing rugby. I think every injury chips off a little bit more, and it's like scar tissue. It grows back stronger and stronger and stronger, but eventually there's no scar tissue to re-heal. And I think that was sort of it in terms of an analogy, and also the matter of fact that the hamstring wasn't able to take it. So it's probably a good way of looking at it, actually. But like, I mean, it was the right time, and it made sense not to go out and risk like permanently not being able to walk, perhaps, because it could be that severe if I was to go out and take painkillers or whatever to try and get through a training session. But yeah, like, I mean, the fact that I got so many surgeries, this one was done, and there was distinct structural damage in the hamstring on the MRI post surgery, and it was obviously touching the wrong nerve, and the pain is still there. Now I'm able to do some slow jogs and walk and things like that, but all in all, I am lucky that it wasn't a head injury. I said it in the previous interview as well, that something that would have left you permanently damaged. And I think having something that would affect the mind or the brain, that's probably the most important thing, that I'm able to think clearly and physically able to walk and jog and things like that. I think I'm completely fine with that in terms of the long-term ramifications of rugby. So I am one of the lucky ones, I always say it, and we are all very lucky. So it's look, I mean, it's how good is it to sit back and say you played professional rugby? So I mean, not many people get to say that, and I'm quite content with that. So
you're saying you're lucky there, and you obviously experienced a lot of gratitude for the time that you spent playing professional rugby, but just to touch on the mind there as well, because obviously going through injury after injury is tough. And in that state, initially, it's going to be not the best for your mind, but longer term, are you grateful for going through that, in that you touched on earlier that you're quite a resilient individual, and you possibly wouldn't be as resilient if you didn't have to go through those experiences?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of the best athletes and people in their fields have gone through a lot of the time have gone through some sort of big adversity previously in their careers. So I think that's why maybe clinging on to the hope that these setbacks were worth it was a big thing for me, that I do this now, I'll do my time. I'm injured the whole time, and it's a good comeback story, and I'll be as hungry as ever. But obviously it didn't materialize that way, but that was sort of what I was feeding myself. But it definitely, like, I mean, that's why no matter what happens now, it's like I've learned so much, and so much life experience about that. And I said it again, your attitude, but that resilience as well, definitely was one thing I picked up, because I mean, there was a lot of times there you're waking up at 8 o'clock in the morning to go train, and it was going to rehab couple hours and do all the meetings, see people happy after the weekend, their performances, and people playing and being able to train and things. And it was just, they'd go out and train and I'd be alone in the gym, and it was quite sad in that regard. So having the hunger to get back and be where they are. I think it's probably one thing I always use as a driver for me. And I said it to my girlfriend. When I was injured, I was on the couch watching, I think it was Leinster, Glasgow, potentially on the TV. And I said, remind me about how I feel now, looking at how happy everyone is on the TV when I get back playing, because I think that's good fuel for the fire within me. And I possibly tried to play too much on the emotion side when I did get back to play, because I was like so frantic and hectic, and I wasn't relaxed in what I was doing, like we were talking about earlier, and I was probably focusing on the wrong things. So yeah, I mean, these are all things you learn with life and life experience. So I think sometimes you don't fully, I won't say appreciate, I think you don't fully understand how important, like you wouldn't learn gratefulness or resilience and things like this unless something happened in the previous life. It's like you tell a kid not to touch something because it's hot, and they go and touch it. You sort of have to learn from it, you know what I mean, rather than just telling someone to do something. I think sometimes life experience is the most important part.
But if you were not to tell somebody to do something, but if you were to give a little bit of advice to people that are going through that challenge or that adversity of a longer term injury, when they are feeling isolated and they are feeling like there may be no hope, how would you advise them into how to develop that hunger and drive to push and to come back as a stronger athlete than you were when you got injured?
It's a tough question, because I think if you could answer that effectively, you'd be in a very high-paying job somewhere. But I think definitely with these things, I think not to catastrophize the situation. So not to, this is the end of the world, I think is also not the way to look at it, because sometimes that does happen. And then I know people always say you're not alone, but it's very important to understand that what you're feeling, and people, I take great comfort in the fact that like there's definitely someone that's felt a lot worse than you in this situation, and there's definitely people who feel the same as you. So I mean, there's comfort in the fact that there's other people that have gone through and felt the exact same emotions and physically what you're feeling now. So like, don't beat yourself up that it's just you, because there's definitely other people that have 100% been in your shoes. And I think that does puts you at a bit of ease, because you're not fully thinking about in your head, thinking about how I feel now. It's sort of like, well, there's other people feeling like this, so I can kind of relax a little bit, and that sort of breaks the ice. And then leading from that, then it's just sort of like trust the process, figure out how long it's going to take, and try and knock a couple of weeks off that. I always think it's a good aim to get my physio used to add on like a month onto my rehab, because I automatically take a month off the return to play date. So it was sort of worked out like that. But they knew by the end of it to add a month on. So I think having distinct markers throughout your rehab and getting are you kind of talking about like from a rehab standpoint in general advice? Is that sort of the question?
I think you're answering it pretty well,
yeah,
to be honest, but it is from an acute injury standpoint.
Yeah,
and trying to recover and get back to playing or performing.
Yeah, once you're aware of, I think, the distinct markers that you need to hit throughout your injury. So for me, it would have been, I get a knee injury. First of all, you're in a brace. So what's the timeline like to get out of the leg brace? And then that could be a week. For me, it was a couple of days, because I'd done injuries previously. So I was able to sort of like just plow through it without feeling my way around the place. I sort of just took my leg out of the brace, and then it's sort of like getting movement into it. So being able to tense your quad, stimulate the muscles in your quad and calves, and then being able to move it up and down. So bridge, 2-leg bridge, being able to weight bear fully. These sort of markers, you're always like plugging away at them. And once you're hitting them, then it's that feeling of you've achieved something, and suddenly you're halfway through and it's like, Jesus, this isn't too bad. And you're getting back to run and getting a bit of strength back in your leg. It doesn't look like one straight line. There's a bit of definition coming back in your quad. And I think once you have good clarity from your physiotherapist that what the markers are and when we need to be hitting them, and if like give or take a week or two, like don't be too hard if you're not exactly hitting them, because most of this is done off feel. Again, if it feels really bad on a given day, well then communicate it and don't plow through it, because it's one step forward, 3 steps back with these sort of things. It's better to go a lot off how it feels, and if it feels really good, then maybe you can push it 10% more than what you thought you could. And that's how I sort of went through my injury, was done off feel. So
just on that, Conor, make sure as well, from my own advice, before you go pushing it that extra 10-20%, to do what Conor has just touched on he did with his physio and his performance practitioners, was consult with them and talk to them about it. And it sounds like you developed a very close relationship with those performance staff. And they really probably appreciated the small wins as much as you did, because it sounds like there you use the metrics as a little bit of a win. Every time you hit one, you're like, tick that off, good job, little dopamine kick, and on to the next one.
Yeah, I think like I would be very old school in the sense that I would have not cared for metrics at all when it came to rehab. So that was sort of ingrained in me by my physio, because they're very, and it's a good way, because you need to quantify the progress, and I think it is important to put numbers on it, but I just hated doing that. So but by the end of it, I got good at it and I understood where they're coming from. But yeah, like you develop such a close relationship with these guys. Like Carl Denver, I've talked about him numerous times before, how good he's been, and he's so emotionally invested in me and my progress that it's kind of a journey together. You sit down, plan it out. But like you're saying there, I think it's important. I had a physio with me looking at everything I was doing, and it's important not to go off on a solo run and doing these extra sessions yourself, because it might feel like you're doing good work, but at the end of the day, like a lot of the time, I sort of contradict myself in terms of how it feels. But you just don't want to, like, the heart ache and break of having to go back and rehab an injury that you've done because you pushed too hard and came back too soon, or something like that. And of course it's situational. There's times when you need to take the risk of, if you're preparing for a county final or an All-Ireland final or whatever championship final, and you're injured and you need to, it's worth the risk is better than the reward of coming back for that. But there's times, most of the time, it's the start of the season or whatever, you got injured, and it's important to go through all the processes properly and get it 100% right before you go back, because you'll come back and you might, the injury itself might be fine, but in terms of match fitness, I suppose you're thinking, you're going to be in your head for a good bit when you're out training, because you're going to be thinking about the injury, and it's not the right thing to be thinking about, because you're like, how's my leg holding up? How's my leg holding up? How does that feel? When you should be thinking about, where's the next ball coming from? How, like, you know, what's my position? What's this, that, and the other? You're thinking about sort of, it's just adding more to your brain. So I think the longer you give yourself to readapt to the environment is probably better. And some people are better at it than others. And I think people who have gotten injured previously probably are better at doing it than those who haven't. But yeah, it's there's so many different moving parts with an injury, because it's not just the actual rehabbing of it. It's how it affects you when you leave the building every day, and the relationships you have outside of that, and how you respond to it, and what you're doing in your spare time then. Is it positive or negative activities? Are you just sitting up and playing the PlayStation for the rest of the day? Are you staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning watching movies? It's just things like that. I think you need to look at it from just an overall picture, that you've good habits, and yeah, your attitude sort of reflects that you're hungry to get back and play, but not too soon.
Yeah, you don't want to go 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you'll need a high level of patience, and you need a lot of diligence to be able to order your life in that you're looking at it holistically and you're getting the most out of yourself in every endeavor, but equally not getting stressed about it. And that's where it's very important to have a physio or a practitioner with you who you have a good connection with and who you've developed a relationship with. And it sounds like yourself and Carl have a very close relationship. So I was interested to ask, because of that emotional investment that he has in you, was that one of the most difficult conversations to have around the retirement? To say to Carl, like, Carl, I think it's time to knock it on the head? Or did you come to that decision together?
Well, yeah, like it was kind of like, it was easy in that regard, because the decision was like forced on me. Like I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. So it just, my hamstring wouldn't let me do what I wanted to do. So that was like, it was a lot easier than if I had to be like, look, man, I know I'm physically able to do this, but like I just can't do it anymore. So that was easier, but at the same time it was very hard because like all the work we had done and all the hours and all this, that, and the other, like calling out to his house to get treatment sometimes and things, and diagnosis. But it was hard, and thinking back on it, like it was hard on him as well, I'm sure, because he was so like, it's his job and that's his life, making people get better and helping people get better, and he's one of the best at doing it. So I mean, it was hard and it was easier in one sense, but it was still very, very difficult. And like I'm in regular contact with him now, and like if I wanted to go down and do a 4-hour session with him tonight, he'd come on over, kind of thing. Like, so it's a very good relationship. And he always said, anytime you want something done, or you know, any future endeavors, like you let me know and I'll help you out, sort of thing. So I'm always very appreciative of that, and he's a good guy. So as I said, he cared more about my body than I probably did. So
did that give you a decent insight into what the life of a physio or a performance practitioner or a member of the sports medicine team is like?
Yeah,
being injured and being there with them day in, day out?
Yeah, I think like, because they're very like the physios and the athletic trainers in Leinster are very functional with their approaches in terms of it's black and white in terms of, this is where we are and this is where we need to be, so we're going to get this done as efficiently as possible. There's no, I think a lot of the time the physiotherapy books might be thrown out in terms of what the proper procedure is with a lot of things, but they have their system and their ways that work. And it's like, in terms of the big things that need to be procedural are procedure. But like, I know a lot of the time the interns come in, and this is just for me looking, observing, so I don't actually know. I've never studied physio, I've never studied any of that sort of stuff, but like they'd come in and like, you know, the proper way to tape an ankle or a shoulder, like it's by the book and this is how you do it. It's a very slow process. Whereas the lads know exactly what each player needs, and it's just like boom, 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 boom. Doesn't look good, but it does its job. And they're there, you know, the intern would cut the tape and put it on. You know, it's just like things like that. It's just like it's so much more tailored to the demands of the professional game and demands of like speed, is being able to do things efficiently and quickly. Because if you have a room of 25 lads, which is what it would be before a training session, that need tape and need treatment, then it needs to be done. Like you can't be slow or inefficient what you're doing. It needs to be quick and to the point and job done, sort of thing. So seeing how that works in terms of the way and I suppose, what would you say, a professional sports team physio works is interesting, because like I'd see other guys doing a GA job or doing a club football championship match or whatever, and it's a stark contrast sort of thing, which is completely understandable because of the resources available. But it's a lot different, I think, to how it normally would be if you go to get a physio session. You know, you pay your 100 quid or whatever to go get physio. It's like, you know, you get a massage on your leg and a bit of movements and stuff. It's just not the same thing. Like, and now, of course, there's so much different treatment you can get. So that's what I always thought it was, because I was brought up with a GA background, and my dad would he'd bring me down to his training and he'd get a rub before training and stuff. And that's how I saw physio. Then you go in, it's like, these guys will not rub anything. There's masseuses for that. They're physios. So
it's moving that way though. It is moving that way in the private practice as well, which is
it okay?
Good. Like, but like saying
how it was. This was 15 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm old school now.
But if people need a rub as well, like, or a massage, then they are willing to do it as well. But
100%.
It's a case
some physios
it's not
don't.
Needed. Like,
some physios don't. Yeah, I just remember. Some physios don't, and it's just like, I'll get up and get a rub here, and he's like, no, don't do that. That wasn't in Leinster. That was underage, one of the underage teams. But it was probably that it was the wrong thing to do at the time. But
as well as that, he knows that if he was to rub you, then he'd have a queue out the door.
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it. But I suppose people, like, when they go to a session, they like some sort of instant result in terms of when you leave, you're like, I feel a lot better now. Whereas I think a lot of the time with physiotherapy, it's like there's more of a process to it, that not everyone's willing to do the exercise you give them at home. And, there's the process of this might be like, this will be better in 4 weeks if you do this, this, and this 3 times a week. People just don't tend to do that.
Better use of the time. Like,
yeah, I think so. Yeah. Whereas
it's amazing the insight you have into it now, even though you're saying that you don't have a great idea of the intricacies of physio, but you can see how it is working. Maybe if you don't know exactly what they're doing or why they're doing it, but you see how it works. But look, you've touched on it enough times now that I want to move on to it before we finish, because you've mentioned going off on a solo run. You've mentioned playing in a county final, playing in an All-Ireland final. You haven't actually mentioned like Champions Cup or anything like that. It's all been GAA lingo.
I just try to relate I'm trying to relate to the audience here.
Yeah, fair. Yeah, I think there is still a fair grow in you for the GAA, and from hearing you speak like about rugby, obviously, and it was forced upon you, your retirement, and you did everything you could in rugby with the time you had. With your finishing up of playing football and hurling, because you were a former dual star for Westmeath, that was more like a decision that you made yourself. So is there any aspect of you that wonders like, what if I did go down that route? Or are you totally at acceptance with that as well?
Like, I mean, it'd be pretty crazy. Like you say it's like 90, well, not even 99.9%, but like if there was a decision to be made at that age, I'd struggle to find someone that wouldn't go down the professional route. I'm just trying to think, like, in terms of if you know you're good enough in your heart of hearts to play professional sport and make it at that professional sport, because there's people that might be like, I was getting trials here or that, and they were like, I chose Gaelic football over it. I struggled to, I don't want to find someone who was actually like a prodigy, or not a prodigy, but like was 100% making it at that sport, professional sport, that made the decision towards GA.
I think you may move down to Kerry then, because there's a fair amount of lads down there that have been recruited for the AFL and have said no thanks, which is interesting. That's a culture thing, I think.
And there's more to that as well, because like you don't grow up playing any AFL.
Yes.
Well, 100%. You probably don't. And it's a different thing because you're moving literally the furthest country away from Ireland. And the culture over there is a good bit different to the Irish one in terms of they're quite macho men, and like Australian sort of confidence would be a stark contrast to your average Irish person. So I think you'd have to be very, I don't really know anyone that's gone to play AFL. I've obviously heard it and seen so many people go over, but I don't know any of them personally, but anyone that's made it over there, like, has my full it's incredible being able to do that, go over. And you look at Jim Steins and these guys that went over, and he obviously got the Brownlow medal for his performances in Melbourne, but him going over and to be the best player at a sport that he didn't know for the first half of his life and didn't even touch the ball, it's just absurd. And it's the fact that it was professional at the time as well. It's just the mindset these guys have is just like, you have to just be an absolute dog, and the most you're being thrown completely out of your comfort zone. You're going over at 18, 19 years of age to Australia, and you don't know anyone, you don't know the sport really. I know they're better at incorporating the AFL ball to younger guys now at these camps and rookie camps and things like that in Ireland, but I think being able to do definitely that has I have big admiration for those guys. But then you look on the flip side, I'd say something like rugby or soccer, like you're growing up and playing that as a first or second sport alongside GAA. So it's different. That AFL is sort of a slightly different one, because obviously it's going over and you're taking a lot more risks going over. Whereas if you're staying put and, playing with Munster instead of Kerry, it's like, again, I'm sure there is loads of lads that have done it actually, now that I'm thinking about it. I've never thought about that. But I would have struggled to, I suppose, what the reasoning was behind choosing county football over being a professional rugby player with Leinster, Munster, Connacht, Ulster. I think possibly if you were fully sure you're going to make it at being an international or like interprovincial player, that would be an interesting conversation to have with someone, I think. Because I'd be like, what was going through your head, or what did you think? Did you just completely go by how that sport made you feel? Because a lot of the times with myself, I kind of went off expectation of what other people thought, and my family and things, and what would have made them happy. And it's obviously the worst way to look at it, because it's all completely down to the individual and what makes you happy. Because like we only have one shot at life, and there's no point doing something you don't want to do or living someone else's life. So when I realized that, I think I was able to again make peace with a lot of my decisions, and like I gave it a crack and put in the hard work so that one day I could be a Lion or an international with Ireland, and it'd all be worth it. I'd look back and be like, this is it, now I made it, and we keep going here, see how far we can get. But it never came around, and I'm okay with that, because I learned and did so much along the way and experienced so much, like go to so many unbelievable countries and experience playing in front of thousands of people and playing for your country at under 20s and making loads of really good friends. And yeah, I don't think anything will come close. And that might be why Brian O'Driscoll and these guys talk about how AP McCoy, I think, and Brian O'Driscoll, something popped up in my feed talking about how a professional sports person has two lives, or they die twice. Because obviously when you retire, it's one death, and then when you actually die, it's another, because it's a completely different life. And I never reached the highs of those men, so I can't. That's why it's a lot easier for me to sit here and say that I'm adapting to it a lot better, because I never experienced the really heights they did, and that's why it made it easier, because they weren't like AP McCoy was the most successful jumps jockey of all time. Brian O'Driscoll played for the Lions, multiple Lions tours, 100-odd Irish caps. You know, like, this is, how are you ever going to feel the exhilaration of jumping over the final fence at Aintree or Cheltenham, or how are you ever going to score in a try for the Lions down in Australia? Like, that's, I can see their
So you
issues.
weren't as tied to your identity, your personal identity as an athlete, because you didn't reach the heights that you felt you could have? Or is it because you had more time to work on other aspects outside of your life as an athlete? Or a combination, maybe? Probably
a combination, yeah. But I think it was probably the heights piece. I think just the fact that I didn't play in front of a packed Aviva and sing Aaron Levine, you know, that probably would have been a moment that I'd be like, this is it now, that's peak for me. Because you look at that every Six Nations when you're growing up, like, that's Saturday or Sunday afternoon, watching it with your dad after rugby training. It's like, that's peak, you know. And everyone would have been so proud of that, but it didn't happen. But then, like, I mean, that's why I think if you experience those sort of things, like, it's like a drug, you know. You experience some really big high, you're like, I might go back and do that again. And then when it's taken away from you, it's like, oh my God, like, what do I do? And that's sort of it. Like, I think it is, because obviously it is, in a way, it is like a drug, because you're getting those emotions and the dopamine, endorphins, all this, that you never experience that natural high without taking drugs. So don't take drugs.
But it's not the same as well.
It's not. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
I do.
I can tell you, like, the best natural feeling I've ever had was scoring a try in the RDS. I would say, I remember, it was just a try. I don't know what try it was. And it was the best feeling I've ever had naturally. And I remember the feeling, and I was like, this is why it's worth it. And
which one was it?
I don't know. I don't even remember. I don't even remember. Potentially.
Do you remember the feeling of elation? Like,
I just remember diving down to score it under the post in the RDS. And I was like, so pumped and hyped. And I was like, this is such a good, like, this is the best ever. And I was like, I was the best I've ever felt in my life. In that moment, in terms of the feeling. Now, it mightn't have been the best day I've ever had or anything, but like, you know, that was just in that moment, that instant feel. I was like, that's worth it. It's worth a year of pain, or worth years of pain. That was 100% worth it, just for that. It's bizarre.
And here's me thinking that it was going to be the hat trick you scored against Ross Gray in the semi-final. But
I still remember it. I remember that.
I'm joking.
Because it was the first time I was playing 19, or that age group. So I was like, I was breaking myself. And then we get out and it was grand. So I was like,
yeah, you were only opposite a small little fella across from you. So
I was smaller than you, no doubt.
No, you absolutely were not. Because I was like, how is this lad a year younger than me? But anyway, look, I have great admiration for your humility, your ability to stay in the present, your high level of self-awareness, as I've touched on. So I think like a great conversation. But before we finish, let's move on to quickfire questions, which may get a little bit profound as well. So the first one is proudest achievement to date.
Ooh, is this supposed to be quick? Like really quick?
It doesn't have to be.
They're just quick fire questions. Proudest achievement to date. I would say, it has to be playing professional rugby. It has to be.
Favorite athlete of all time?
I don't want to give you a wishy-washy answer.
Why? What were you going to say? Your dad?
No, he'd probably be my favorite. Like, he'd be my biggest role model, but it wouldn't be like necessarily from an athlete's point of view. You know,
that's important as well.
100%, 100%. Like, my dad is a role model for me, so not necessarily playing fullback for. You know, I didn't strive to be a fullback for Offaly, like, but you know, it's still in a way outside off the pitch as well.
You get the hamstring right, you never know what will happen.
Yeah. I probably I don't like basketball at all. I really just don't like the sport, because I just think anyone that, when you can score that many points and not be able to defend it, it really frustrates me. But I really like Kobe Bryant. I thought he was, like, his mindset, the Mamba mentality, huge. I had huge admiration for him. I watched those documentaries and the pump up videos and stuff before games. So I'd probably take Kobe.
Did you watch the Redeem Team, is it?
Yeah, I actually haven't watched it yet. I don't like basketball.
You will enjoy it. It's not really about basketball. Okay. But Kobe Bryant is just an absolute...
He's an animal. He's an animal. He was an animal, and the poor man, what happened to him was just like, I was really sad when I found out what happened to him and his daughter, because again, when I say I don't like it, it's not like I hate it. I just didn't really enjoy the fact that you couldn't defend people from scoring. But it was actually made me very sad learning of his fate. So
yeah, well, that's obviously because you felt some level of connection to what he did or who he was, and I agree. I felt the same thing, as well as that. I think it was just at the start of lockdowns as well, so we were a little bit emotional. You were going through your injury as well, your first hamstring as well, so you probably were quite emotional. But anyway, what's the biggest thing you've learned in the last 12 months?
The world, or life goes on. I think it's important. There's no point in dwelling on anything too much, because the world's going to keep spinning, and it'll still go on no matter what you do. The sun will still rise tomorrow morning. So don't be too hard on yourself, and just enjoy what you have. I think that's sort of what I've learned in the last 12 months. Not that I've lived by that or anything, but it's a nice.
You're good at the advice. You're right. And then last piece of advice: what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Well, it kind of leads into the last one. I think the advice I give to the 18-year-old self is, like, just don't be so hard on yourself. You idiot. It's you're like, just go out and enjoy yourself, and like, have a focus, but then be able to not be uber critical of everything you do, and go out and with that freedom we were talking about at the start of the episode. I think that's probably like 4 or 5 different pieces of advice, but that's what I would tell myself if I go back in time. Look, everything will work out, and just enjoy it. These cliches are just crazy.
No, but it's true. It's all under the same umbrella. But
look, you know the gist of it. I think, I think find what you're passionate about and go after it too, like a dog with a bone.
It's good to bring it back from the start, back to at the end, looking for that little bit of freedom in what you do, and the enjoyment factor as well. But look, Conor, thanks a million for coming on. Great conversation.
Thank you, Petey.
Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I had fun. Thanks for having me on.